Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in the clown decade. A decade that takes a look at the previous decade and thinks, yeah, we can make that about 10 times worse. As today, we are going to be going through a video by the Serfs. One on a subject that is even older than this channel, but one that somehow I missed even though I'm an avid gamer, but one that when I found out about, I avidly binge-watched a few years ago. And that is of course the subject of Gamergate. And I don't want to spend too much time on what Gamergate actually was, so I will refer you to a single quote by PSA Sitch on his video on Gamergate, which should be the top result if you just type in Gamergate into the YouTube search bar. So Sitch's accurate summary of what Gamergate was that it was a reaction to an industry calling its customers sexist. Since one niche message board was going through the Zoe Quinn drama, and then Zoe Quinn found that out, complained to a load of people in the industry about it, and then everyone called every gamer sexist because some idiots were talking about drama. But if you don't know what Gamergate is and you want a bit more than a one-line summary, as I say, go watch Sitch's video, link is in the description. But because leftists can never let go of the past, whether it be a communist regime such as Soviet Russia or Cambodia, the YouTube channel The Serfs made this video which released 2 days ago. Gamergate, the untold story. And as you can probably tell from the thumbnail alone, Gamergate was a big nuke on civilization and caused the rise of Steve Bannon. At least that's what I can gather from the thumbnail. I haven't actually watched the video yet. I'm going to be live reacting to it essentially through this video. And honestly, I'm amazed that this video isn't astroturfed. It's 2 days old, but it is a hour-long, basically dunking on the most oppressed minority you're allowed to oppress, which is of course gamers. And yet it's only at 13,000 views, and I mean, if you type in Gamergate into the YouTube search bar, you'll of course see PSA Sitch's video right at the top, and then a load of other videos. I even get Sargon of Akkad ones, which is quite surprising. But Lance's, or the Serfs, is way down here, so it's not been astroturfed, strangely. Or at least not yet. It's only 2 days old, but I imagine YouTube will try and push this right to the top, since it goes along with the age-old narrative of everyone is turning into Nazis and every pipeline that isn't communist turns people into Nazis. I do hope YouTube lets me get away with saying the dreaded mid-century German word. But anyway, with all that done, I think we can finally get into the video. So, take it away, The Serfs. So I'm already losing my mind, and we're not even 10 seconds into the video. The Serfs have unironically put a trigger warning in for Gamergate, because there are frank discussions of racism, sex and terrorism, transphobia, and of course, the Austrian painter 2.0 Steve Bannon. Quite frankly, I've already lost my mind at this, because it's already implying that Steve Bannon is somehow related to Gamergate. I'd like to see where he goes with this.
Boobs are awesome.
So I'm just going to quickly skip through this bit because he goes on a really weird tirade about boobs and dicks, and I just don't get it. I think he's just trying to be funny, but I don't really get the joke, I'll be honest. So let's just skip this bit.
If adults want to play MMORPGs with each other as just a pile of bouncing pixelated genitals, then inshallah.
See, jokes like that, I just find it cringe. Like, I don't get the point of this video so far. He starts off with a trigger warning about sexism, racism, homophobia and all that, and the first thing he does is make dick jokes. This just isn't going to make me take this documentary or expose seriously. Which I wouldn't anyway because it's the Serfs, but I don't see how this helps your audience. I guess dick joke funny.
We say this because today we're going to take an exploration into the dark recess of the internet. Into a phenomenon that still continues to this day.
Yes, like a lot of issues that should be long dead to the left, let's say, oh I don't know, Alex Jones, Donald Trump, now that they're both banned completely off the internet. The dreaded TR that I can't mention in Britain as well. These things are long dead or diminished, and the only thing keeping them alive is the left wing, because it's about the only thing they have to actually beat the right on. Because of these web of lies that they are continually making, such as in this video.
One that evolved, oddly enough, from a rebellion against representation all the way to being a primary recruitment tool for modern day Nazis.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. This is how deep the web of lies go. I mean, I'm sure Lance is going to bring it up, but he's probably going to bring up that whole, the big network of right-wing Nazis where it links Jordan Peterson with about 50,000 people because he knows someone who talked to, say, Richard Spencer and things like that, and they're going to somehow blame it on Gamergate. And lie saying that Gamergate was a reaction to people wanting more representation in games, when anyone who goes through any Anita Sarkeesian video, and there are literally hundreds of them, will point out just how wrong she is and how much of a grifter she is, because she set up a fund to set up a Discord server, which she got the money for and then never did. Like, what more do you have to do to scream grifter?
Some have even suggested that the growth and power of the online alt-right led to the election of...
Yes, again, I'm going to be charitable and say this is a joke, but again, why are you making jokes like this when you're trying to convince me that Gamergate made Nazis? Like, Nazis should be the one enemy you don't want rising again, especially if you're a communist, or a socialist, or whatever. They are seen as the pure evil, and yet you're here censoring names like Donald J. Trump out to make a joke. Like, why are you making jokes about this when at the same time you're trying to say, oh, this is a serious topic, this is a pipeline to, you know, the Nazi Fourth Reich in America? You need to make your mind up on the tone of this video.
The first president memed into existence.
So today, let's take a look at the NPC meme and the idea of meme magic and why this is a tool that's very powerful that the right uses to constantly win.
I mean, Tim Pool is right here, but I really want to see what Lance says to try and counteract this. But I don't think he will. I think he'll just leave this clip in and let it show that memes are letting the right win. I mean, there's no way he can't react to that. That's a massive part of the right wing at the moment.
However, we're not doing this because we don't want to see beautiful naked people in video games. That's fine. In fact, like we mentioned, we want more #FreeDong.
Now, I know we're not in the main bulk of the video, so he's not making arguments yet, but I don't see the obsession with all these dick jokes. Like, don't get me wrong, I love a good joke, especially in informative videos. They keep things entertaining and keep things rolling. That's why, I mean, I'm not saying I don't make jokes in any video ever, but the ratio's way off. So far, I mean, I've cut bits out because they're just unfunny jokes. But the ratio has been about 90% of this has been jokes, and about 10% has been serious statements, which is, oh, Gamergate's a pipeline to the alt-right or the neo-Nazis or whatever. That so far seems to have been his one serious statement, and the rest of it has been trying to tell this narrative through jokes, which I wouldn't mind if two things. One, the narrative was true, and two, the jokes were funny. So far I'm giving this video about a 2 out of 10.
We're just gonna stab that straw man to death before you shut the video off. The rage comments about how this is actually a soy cuck fest of beta male virgins, because joke's on you, internet, we've experienced penetration before.
And again, this is the thing, it's like, oh, you know, the narrative that, oh, we just don't want naked women in video games and all that. Oh, that's a straw man, and see, we're not virgins. Like, what a weird thing to put in the video. You know, putting something like this in a video makes it clear that comments like that bother you. You do realise that. Because, like, when I'm called all sorts of names under the sun like that, I'll just ignore them. Or sometimes I'll just say, yeah, I see these things and I don't care. That's all you have to do. You don't go back like, oh, you've been called a virgin. It's like, joke's on you, I've had sex loads of times. Like, it just makes you look cringe. And it's not a good reaction to it. But anyway, please get this instruction over and done with. This is excruciating.
We've also got some more good news. Men are awesome. Don't listen to whatever fake arguments you've heard about the woke scolds who run the left.
Yeah, I'm not being funny, but I read The Guardian every 2 weeks. I know for a fact that the left do hate men. Or at the very least, classically masculine men.
We love men and agree there are tons of problems that aren't talked about enough in mainstream media. Abhorrently high rates of suicide, overdoses, addiction, and homicides disproportionately affect the male half of the species.
I wonder if he's going to work out that quite a lot of those problems are because a lot of boys do not have fathers, and that causes a lot of issues. Or if he thinks that it should be the state having overarching power, that should be able to stop things like that.
We think the patriarchy is shitty for men, and we're going to be frequently talking about how anyone vilifying men as a generality in this tale have been contributing to the problem.
Alright, so he's trying to say that there's nuance here. Alright, we'll see how that goes, because so far every narrative on Gamergate that he has put forward has just not been true. And also I say that if you even say the word patriarchy, you are just a man-hater. I don't care how much you try and say, oh, but I worry about suicides of men, I worry about homicides of men. Yeah, but you're calling it patriarchy. You're implicitly blaming men for that, and all men. Because it's pretty much the same thought process as critical race theory, where everything is due to a white supremacist system, and they blame everyone who is part of that system, which is implicitly blaming every single white person in the system, plus the black people that they don't deem as capital B black anymore. The same thing was happening with sexism a few years ago, it's just now it's turned into talks on race rather than sex or gender or whatever.
Now, make no mistake, the tale of the neckbeards is amongst the most salted and depressing rabbit holes one can go down. But it's an important hole to explore.
I'm sorry, but again, these visuals are just all over the place with me. He's clearly trying to insult neckbeard here, and yet at the same time it's kind of an underhanded punch, because if you're showing neckbeards to be two people in a bar drinking whiskey playing chess, you're making them seem very respectable and intelligent, when really the serfs basically hate these people. You know, they think people like Sargon of Akkad, Carl Benjamin, you know, the Quartering, things like that, they think they're just full of hate and want to see people suffer. So they put a visual like this up to say, see, we respect them really, we think they're intelligent. It's just really underhanded and really, really irritating for me, because it's just so dishonest. Just look, if you don't like these people, just admit it. Don't try and underhand it with these visuals.
It's likely you know one or two aspects of this tale, but to see how connected and complex they become is to taste the beard of God. So buckle down and pull out your red suppository, because it's time to mansplain the annals of internet history.
Like, look, I get you've got to be entertaining. I do get it, but the thing is, you can make informative videos entertaining without having all these vulgar jokes and then trying to be self-deprecating at the same time. I think my best example I can think off the top of my head is from probably my favourite series on YouTube at the moment, which is Firearms Experts Reacts to Weapons from various video games, in this example Far Cry 6. And this guy is the keeper of firearms at the Royal Armouries Museum in Leeds. And the whole video is him seeing clips from video games, seeing the guns from video games, and explaining where they've gone well, where they've gone wrong, and also go through some wacky designs where he says, yeah, this isn't very plausible but quite fun. But I'll put intermittent jokes in there, while at the same time being incredibly informative, and I don't think he's ever sworn, and if he ever makes reference to something phallic or anything like that, it won't be in the way Lance does it, where he's like, dong, dong, dong. He'll be like, you know, this giggle phallic thing on the gun, and then he'll explain what it actually does or doesn't do. Whereas Lance just says, yeah, I want more dong in video games. It's like, yeah, that's great. I mean, just take a look at this clip.
I guess you didn't hear about
It isn't just weaponized, this thing still plays music, which I have to say is a nice touch. So the last thing you hear before you die would be the Macarena. I mean, that feels like a fate worse than death to me.
But anyway, from this point on, I'm just going to try and cut out as many useless jokes as possible, because this video is an hour long, and I honestly get the feeling it could have been 15 minutes. But hey, it's not like I make short videos. You see, stuff like this, as I said before, his introduction was 90% jokes, you know, a 10% serious tone. And now, now let me, after all these jokes, let me present you with this introduction with a really somber tone, because Gamergate has destroyed Western civilization. Make your mind up on the tone, it is all over the place. And my lord, look at this, look at this cast list. From the people I know Sean, I think I know Dan Arrows, I know Thought Slime. Just those three alone just shows me this is not going to be a great video. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a whole chapter dedicated to hating Sargon of Akkad and other people from the old skeptic community. Anyway, let's get into chapter 1, which is the origin story. Take it away, Serfs.
Gamergate. It's a word that conjures up both nostalgia and horror depending on whom you're speaking to.
I think it brings up nostalgia only so far as kind of with the right wing. The community was quite hyperactive and pretty funny. And, you know, it brought a lot of people together who nowadays are, you know, they've splintered off into their own areas, I'd say. And a new crop have come out of the woodwork. But I think really a lot of these people would have just been a lot happier being left alone and to actually enjoy video games as they were, rather than have to deal with people in the industry that is trying to sell them their products, telling them that they're sexist, racist, homophobic, whatever, for some drama that they didn't even know about.
While the story has been told before, it's important to refresh some of the more important parts of it and how the controversy in video game journalism gave way to an online explosion of testosterone and sticky socks.
You see, things like that, when he says in the introduction, oh no, we don't hate men, right, that's the Bailey. It's like, look, we love some men. Here are some basic stats that right-wingers turned out to be right about, and that we don't live in a patriarchy. But then they spin it around and say we do live in a patriarchy, and that's why men want to commit suicide. Which doesn't make any sense, because we're coming out of patriarchy, as they'd call it, and men are killing themselves more. But then they say, oh, Gamergate was an explosion of testosterone and sticky socks. Again, another vulgar joke. Again, he's trying to make this a somber tone and things like that. If you're trying to do that, don't make dick jokes, don't make cum jokes, don't do stuff like that. It completely undermines the tone. But also you're saying it's an explosion of testosterone, and this is what I said before. They hate masculinity and they hate masculine men. That is the moat. It is quite hard to hate masculine men because masculine men are actually relatively virtuous. Given that they tend to be chivalric, given that they tend to have an honour code, given that they tend to be pretty good defenders of those that are less fortunate or weaker than they are. A prime example would be a certain someone in court in America at the moment who was defending his sister from being bullied and assaulted.
Like strategy games and shooter games, play them because they love them, not because someone sold them a pink controller or put boobs on a character.
So I was going to take this clip out, but I need to show you the type of useless stuff he leaves in. I don't know how this is in any way related to what he just said, because I don't even have context for what Lauren Southern's talking about here, but I can make a guess. I'm guessing she's saying that gamer girls buy games because they actually enjoy playing the games, rather than having, you know, things that are more marketed towards women in them, such as she says, pink stuff and women. But I don't see what this had to do with what Lance just said. He just put a clip of Lauren Southern in for, like, no reason.
While most people believe it began with Zoe Quinn and their ex-boyfriend's blog post, the origins technically trace back to 2012, with a then relatively unknown Anita Sarkeesian.
Oh my lord, this ought to be good. Just so you know, I did just take out another clip that had absolutely nothing to do with the video. This is what I mean, this could have been 15 minutes.
In May 2012, she launched the Kickstarter campaign to fund the production of a series of videos on tropes versus women in video games. Asking for only $6,000, she ended up making over 26 times her original goal.
Gotta respect the grift, I'll give you that.
Clearly, there was an analytic gap missing when exploring video game plot points and culture, and people were willing to pay for it.
I mean, yeah, nothing really wrong with that sentence. I suppose you could argue it was astroturfed by feminists in positions of power and things like that, such as in universities, such as in the media, things like that, or even in the gaming industry. But ultimately, astroturfing only works so far. There is some popular support. That's the only way astroturfing really works. I mean, this thing made over $150,000. There will have been some popular support for that, to be fair. And feminism didn't come with the baggage that it comes with these days. It was just seen as a good political position by most. So, I so far, not much wrong with this, though I think it's quite hard to screw up this bit of information.
The industry was lacking in critical analysis and had already begun focusing on new ways to generate income. While the early days of Atari and Sierra had female pioneers like Roberta Williams, by 2010 women only accounted for 10% of the video game industry.
And this is the part where the analysis screws up. And this is another part where you could start saying, well, they just hate men. I mean, I'm not going to go that far. But I will say, yeah, no duh, men made up most of the video game industry, and still do when it comes to actually developing. And the reason is that men are more likely to be developers, because it's, for lack of a better term, a very thing-orientated thing. It is pure logic. And that is not to say that women can't do things like that. It's not to say no women at all even likes that. It's just that less women do. And when it comes to software development, as a software developer myself, it is basically entirely thing-orientated. So for women who more naturally prefer people-orientated things, software development is not the way forward for them. But clearly, even in 2010, and even for those pioneers as he mentioned, it was still there for some. And that was fine. No one had a problem with this, apart from feminist frequency. Because as Douglas Murray says in The Madness of Crowds, everything is better when women are doing it. Everything is better when gay people are doing it. Everything is better when trans people are doing it. It's never been about equality. It's always been about revenge for a perceived incorrect reading of history.
It was a trend that started with Nintendo marketing their video game products to boys after the gaming crash of the 1980s.
See, I love this bit quite a lot. What saved video games? Marketing directly to boys. Why might that be? Because most boys play those type of video games at the time. And you always see these stats come out saying like, oh, over half of gamers are women. Yeah, the type of games that women play tend to be your mobile puzzle games like Candy Crush and things like that. Whereas if you look at your PC gamer demographic and the type of people building PCs, it's overwhelmingly men. Like you look at the shooter demographics, overwhelmingly men. And the games they had at the time on Nintendo, you know, Super Mario Brothers, you had fighting games like Street Fighter, things like that. Very much male-dominated, even to this day, genres. But apparently this is an issue, because girls prefer to do other things. And look, as Anita Sarkeesian herself showed in the clip I cut out, she was playing Zelda on the SNES. Like, even though it was marketed at boys mostly, girls still played them. Like, this whole problem with marketing, it's a very modern and feminist issue that no one really cares about, but they've still managed to take over.
Appearing in the boys, tweens, and in-between sections, gaming and its marketing became associated with men despite also being popular with women.
Yes, and things like horse riding are associated with women despite the fact that a lot of men do it. What is the issue here? The issue here is that men like something. This is why you need to, like, cut down the straw man early, saying, oh, we don't just hate men. Well, then what was the issue here? Oh, women like it too. No one cares. Women like Lego. Still associated with men.
Fast forward to 2012, and Anita produced a series of videos on the numerous sexist elements present in popular gaming franchises.
I don't know how the Serfs have managed it, but you know, I cut out that whole thing about them saying boobs are good and we want more boobs in video games and stuff like that. And then because he's a moron and doesn't check his scripts, I say that, I'm not scripting this video. Point still stands. Because he doesn't check his scripts, he uses a clip where Anita Sarkeesian's trope here is that tits are in video games. Which is it, Lance? Are tits allowed in video games or not? Are they a sexist trope, or do you actually want more? Like, you tell me. Because right here, your prime example of Anita Sarkeesian pointing out sexism in video games is that women are in it and showing their tits off a bit. Unbelievable scenes.
And you can imagine the calm, collected, measured response the internet had.
2010, there was a video, I think it was 2010, the video was recorded in black and white of her in a university giving a speech where she says, I'm not a gamer. I had to learn a lot about gaming to get into all this. And then come 2012, I mean, that video wasn't released until after she did her Tropes versus Women in Gaming Kickstarter. May 2012, she starts this Kickstarter, and within the first few days, she starts posting updates on her, I'm being harassed. It's like, well, yeah, people generally react negatively to phenomenal bigots on the internet.
So I thought I'd leave that in because it's just correct. And I think the best part is that Lance would actually agree with Sargon, going off his introduction here, saying that he loves tits in video games and he wants to see more, when at the same time he puts in the visual of Anita Sarkeesian saying, oh, these women have their tits out, and therefore it's sexist. Like, Lance would agree with Sargon here, according to his own video. As I say, it's almost like he doesn't check his script. But at the same time, Lance and all these other leftists see Sargon as a phenomenal bigot. And what do? They react extraordinarily negatively towards him. So, again, they just agree with him. And obviously he was being sarcastic when he's saying, oh, the righties were acting very calm and collected, obviously. Like, obviously he's being sarcastic there, but everything Sargon said there, he would agree with.
The second half of it is the social justice warriors we mentioned briefly. There is a sort of insurgent move in video games from a couple of wacky left-wing feminists, and these are sort of far-left, Israel-hating, socialist weirdos.
Again, it's just posting these clips and not actually giving a counter-argument so far. I mean, I've not seen Milo Yiannopoulos for years. But all this is essentially a 2-minute hate. He's just putting up clips of people who you are supposed to hate because they were against Anita Sarkeesian. But again, I don't think Lance in the introduction realises that he would disagree with Anita Sarkeesian.
So because of those people, because of the few people threatening them, and by the way, I guarantee you, if the entire gaming community threatened Anita Sarkeesian, good lord, there would not be enough people to count how fast those threats would go up, because the gaming community is massive.
Again, what's wrong with what Chris Reagan said? Their issue is that they're saying the gaming industry is blaming all gamers for the threats that Anita Sarkeesian got, and he's just saying, no, it's a vast minority that he obviously disagrees with. Like as Sargon said at the beginning, people get really annoyed when you call them racist, sexist, and accuse them of being threatening when they are not, because some people were.
When you send her a message saying, hey, Anita, I think you're a bitch, she goes, cha-ching.
Where's the lie?
You know, and then she runs off to the next interview. She gets paid. I mean, some of her speeches at university, she's been paid 20 grand a speech.
That's hilarious.
I'm not joking, right?
Again, he's just put this clip in. And he's like, oh, this isn't calm and collected at all. Sargon's just stating facts. What do you mean?
You guys act like only women face harassment online. Constantly feed the trolls. And look, the majority of the people here are trolls because they like to see you freak out about it, and that's exactly what you guys are doing. You're feeding
even
trolls.
your language, like freak out about, like no.
I like how that last one wasn't even the internet, it was someone in real life directly asking Anita Sarkeesian, why are you a grifter? And her response is just to make fun of him. And let's not forget that Anita Sarkeesian is there, complaining about harassment and stuff like that, and then she harasses Sargon, who is literally in the crowd there, calling him garbage human and saying he's the worst person alive. Like, how is that not worse than people sending you mean tweets? But as I say, Lance really needs a narrative to go off here. And all he had here was to basically put people stating facts. With the worst culprit probably being Milo, who was probably a little bit hyperbolic, but I mean, I'm not being funny, Lance. He was probably less hyperbolic than you have been throughout this video.
So, after the death and rape threats seemed to have maxed out and the dust had settled, Anita Sarkeesian's series certainly exposed one thing: that the video game industry was not prepared to take a critical look at itself. In fact, rather than confront many of the worst aspects of the subculture, it decided to morph and mutate into an entirely new online concept.
So the video just cuts there, and you may have missed it, but that was Steve Bannon. Because there was apparently a direct pipeline from people talking about Anita Sarkeesian to Steve Bannon. Okay. But I mean, there's quite a lot of things to say just from those clips. So I don't think anyone has ever denied that rape and death threats were sent on Twitter to Anita Sarkeesian. And everyone I know and I binge-watched said, yes, those things are obviously wrong and please stop doing it. It is not a good thing to do. But of course, Lance just ignores all that and he says, oh, rape and death threats were sent. Oh my god, look at Sargon saying this clip. You know, he's trying to imply that Sargon sent rape and death threats to her. That was the point there for people that maybe aren't as knowledgeable on their side of the story as I am. But also, when he says the worst aspects of the gaming industry, I don't know why he puts someone photoshopping Anita Sarkeesian to look ugly to be the example of the worst parts of the gaming community. Like, you have people literally sending rape and death threats, apparently. Why not use them? It's decisions like this that vastly confuse me. And I think it's really weird to blame the whole gaming industry for a very small subsection of their community. But this was the thing. The narrative was it was every gamer doing this. And that gamers were just all hateful men. So that's the narrative he's going off with. And I love how this is just the end of the chapter. He mentions Zoe Quinn once. And Zoe Quinn is the person that basically every mainstream media outlet went to interview about Gamergate. Because this saw part of Gamergate, but it really did all just kick off with Zoe Quinn's boyfriend writing a blog post. And then a load of people talking about that drama, and then Zoe Quinn complaining about it, and then all of the gaming industry saying that all of their customers are sexist. That is what kicked it off, because it showed the incestuous relationship and the poor ethics in game journalism that resulted from basically every games journalist and every gaming industry basically being in bed together all the time, and just not having any journalistic ethic, and just going off with lies told to them by people that they know. That is called an abuse of power. That is something that these Marxists should care about, but alas, they do not. Because clearly someone like Sargon holds all the power. Give me a break. Anyway, time to get into Chapter 2, which he has named It, which I assume is going to be about Steve Bannon.
The following story is so ridiculous and painful that perhaps the best way to tell it would be to do a scuffed impersonation of the internet historian.
Oh no, don't do this. Don't do that. Don't ruin internet historian for me, please. But I also love how he admits that this story is ridiculous. Like, don't get me wrong, there are ridiculous stories that are true. But a lot of the time they're not. That's why we call them ridiculous stories. But obviously, Lance is going to tell probably a ridiculous narrative here that is probably not going to reflect the truth very well. But let's get into it. I mean, he's doing an internet historian impression. You know, this is all Lance's jokes. Dick jokes, tit jokes, anal jokes, stealing other people's formats. It shows that of a very well-developed mind.
It's 2013. Zoe Quinn, an independent game developer, creates and releases the video game Depression Quest.
I'm already hating this, but all this should be in the origin story bit. I don't have any idea why he's called this chapter It so far. This is still part of the origin story.
It was an interactive fiction game based upon their own experiences with clinical depression. It was widely praised in indie circles as well as favourably reviewed by critics alike.
Yes, this was people's issue. This was literally people's issue. The same people going off with Zoe Quinn's story were also saying that her game was great. This story is already on Gamergate's side. It is already showing the unethical activities of the gaming industry in indie circles. And we're not even 2 paragraphs into this story.
Fast forward to August 15th, 2014. Shortly after the Steam release of Depression Quest, Quinn's ex-boyfriend, Eron Joni, published a lengthy tirade against Quinn on multiple gaming forums. He accuses them of having cheated on him repeatedly during their brief relationship. Seeing as how this activity had been used frequently in the past by MRI communities online to threaten and harass women, the threads were deleted by the forums.
So already there's a bit of discrepancy between PSA Sitch's video on this incident versus this one. Lance says that it was multiple threads and posts and things like that. According to PSA Sitches, it was one blog post that other people then started talking about. I mean, does it really matter which one it is? Not really. But purely just going off both of these people, I'm more willing to trust Sitch than Lance so far, because Lance doesn't even understand that he disagrees with Anita Sarkeesian in his own video. But also Sitch in his video makes it very, very clear that Zoe Quinn, in his metaphor, was on a table at a banquet, which is supposed to be the banquet of gamers, with a load of these forum higher-ups. And so while the excuse might have been that, oh, MRAs, use bad breakups to threaten and harass women, they may have used that as an excuse, sure. But really, again, this whole issue about Gamergate is about ethics in gaming journalism, and clearly these gaming forums, I mean, they appear to be friends with Zoe Quinn. I think it was trying to save face of Zoe Quinn. Because talking about this drama in one section of the internet, I mean, this is literally what set it all off. People were not allowed to talk about this drama, because a lot of people in the gaming industry were friends with Zoe Quinn.
But it's too late. 4chan and Reddit have already got hold of Eron's blog called The Zoe Post, where he accuses a Kotaku writer of exchanging positive coverage of their video game in exchange for sex.
I mean, it's very hard not to comment on just how much this is making me hate Lance, because he's actually putting me off Internet Historian. But so far, this is just all the drama. I want to see what Lance says about whether he thinks these accusations are true or not. Because I think the best thing he can do is just not comment on that, but I get the feeling he will.
See, the core truth at the heart of Gamergate hinged on the assertion that Zoe Quinn had in fact exchanged sex, and yet it was having difficulty proving a single instance of it happening.
Well, again, according to PSA Sitch's video, it was actually nothing to do with whether it was true or not. Basically, no one knew about this drama. I mean, he even admitted, oh, it's 4chan who were talking about it. Like, the amount of crap that 4chan talk about every day, it's hardly mainstream. The most people see out of 4chan is green text, and that's because of all the green text subreddits and Twitter accounts. So already he has a fatal misunderstanding of Gamergate here. The issue is that every gamer was being called sexist because of something 4chan was doing, according to you.
It was, until Nathan Grayson arrived. Gamergaters, who at this point referred to themselves colloquially as Gators, had found their saviour in the form of a Kotaku journalist who was strongly rumoured to be one of Zoe's partners. Not to be labelled as young or obsessive or frankly deeply resentful of women with no social boundaries, the Gators had a rallying cry of ethics in journalism as their public mantra.
So again, the Gators, as Gamergaters apparently called themselves, I've never heard that, but I'll assume it's true anyway. Yeah, they might have found someone that did have an affair with Zoe Quinn to write a positive piece on Depression Quest. Okay, but then you're just playing into the actual problem with Gamergate here, which is that you're just accusing, to be fair with you, you're just calling Gamergaters the sexist ones, whereas Kotaku and all that were calling all gamers this. Because some people, while they may not have had affairs with Zoe Quinn, were friends with her. So she was using her privilege in that position to attack an entire industry of customers. It's not a very good move.
Privately, they used codes online, such as #burgers and fries, titled after a slut-shaming joke used to spread illegal nude photos of Quinn.
So again, this is Lance just using the worst bit of charity you can possibly imagine. According to Know Your Meme, Burgers and Fries was nothing more than a reference to Five Guys because they're saying, oh, Zoe was with Five Guys. It was almost like Cockney rhyming slang. But Lance says this was code to leak and send around nudes of Zoe Quinn. And he also says it's slut-shaming. Well, I'm not being funny, but if you have slept with Five Guys while you're out with another one, whether it happened or not, that is still a bad thing to do and you should be shamed for it. So don't give me this crap that anyone who says burgers and fries was part of this conspiracy for sending around naked images of Zoe Quinn, because I get the feeling it's not true. These things take 2 seconds to look up. How have you screwed up this badly?
All justified, of course, because it was ultimately to fix a broken system.
Tell me one person that defended sending nudes of Zoe Quinn because of Gamergate. Find me one person that defended it. Because I saw all the tweets you had for examples of death threats and rape threats to feminist frequency and all that. And yet you can't even find one person tweeting saying she deserved it here. Yeah, well done.
Except it turns out Grayson hadn't actually reviewed Depression Quest at all. Oops.
Cool, so they were wrong and absolutely no one cared because no one cared about this drama until they were all called sexist.
The quest's the salvage ethics was showing itself to be monstrously unethical. 4chan is ecstatic. Finally, the deeply online manosphere had found direct evidence of women achieving favoritism over men due to their looks and their longing desire to corrupt and change the gaming industry as they knew it. And in ways only 4chan knows how to do, they quickly weaponized the online pepes.
Jesus Christ. I can't follow the story at this point. So we've gone from... I mean, I don't know if Zoe Quinn had an affair with this guy at Kotaku or not, but we do know that he didn't review Depression Quest. So, you know, again, who cares? But now he's just going on about 4chan and Pepe's. Like, I don't know where this has come from, and I don't understand how this is connected. This is like jumping from a Star Trek story and then going straight into Star Wars Episode 5. They are the same genre, but they are by no means the same story, and he just seems to have jumped to another story and said, oh, this is connected, because 4chan, which is the stupidest thing I can imagine anyone saying.
Soon, Reddit joins the fight, spreading Joni's manifesto, and soon they were enacting justice. Internet justice.
I'm sorry, again, I just can't follow this story. What manifesto? I'm sorry, I have absolutely no idea what he's talking about at this point. If someone in the comments could please tell me what this manifesto thing's about, because I've not heard anything about it, and I can't find anything online about it. Even the Wikipedia says that Gamergate had no official leader or manifesto. So what the hell is he talking about?
They had their game negatively review bombed. They compromised their social media accounts and email, and eventually uncovered nude photos of them that were shared with their friends, family, and employers.
Okay, so obviously, again, the nude stuff of Zoe Quinn and all that, yeah, obviously that's bad, but I love how he just assumes that a lot of negative reviews means review bombing. And I mean, that might have been going on, but even if you look at, you know, all reviews as of today for Depression Quest, it's still mixed. So clearly, in general, people don't like it, because Gamergate was years ago now. If it was a good game, by now, it would have been given a positive review by Steam.
As if that wasn't enough atonement for their sins, they would also attack anyone who tried to stand up for them, including Phil Fish, a fellow game developer who had his finances hacked, prompting him to have to sell his company to Polytron Corporation and disappear from the internet entirely.
But this is the problem, he's gone completely off Gamergate. He said at the start this was all 4chan's doing now. But as far as I was aware, with everything I followed to do with Gamergate, it was all to do with YouTube, Twitter, and other social media that was a bit more open than 4chan. Because 4chan's the autistic corner of the internet, and people constantly point out when 4chan does something horrific like this. And then I've just cut out the end of this story where it shows that the harassment made Zoe Quinn and a new boyfriend homeless for a few months because they doxed their address, etc, etc. Yeah, all bad. All bad. No one says to do that stuff. The most prominent Gamergaters, we're against that type of thing. I know because I've watched them all. The only way this is actually connected to Gamergate is the fact it's affecting Zoe Quinn. But the thing is that, again, as he said at the beginning, this was all 4chan. You can't say this was in the name of Gamergate because Gamergate wasn't doing this. And Gamergate didn't really care about Zoe Quinn outside of her calling all gamers sexist and things like that. And having other publications back her up on that. Or because some autists on 4chan did some evil things. Well, it wasn't even that. They were doing it before that. They were doing it just because people were talking about this blog post.
There's just one problem. It didn't happen. Not the harassment and death threats. That all happened to barbaric proportions. We're talking about the manifesto. Zoe Quinn never traded sexual favors for positive reviews of their game.
Again, watch PSA Sitch's video. That bit didn't matter at all. The bit that mattered was the network of the gaming industry calling all gamers sexist and calling all of their customers all these different names to do with bigot. PSA Sitch's video isn't even 10 minutes long. This is all you needed to watch to realise that this has nothing to do with Gamergate. Also, why is this not in the origin story?
They never did it to try and boost sales or generate more money. Because the game is free. It always was.
No, they did it to stay in Zoe Quinn's good graces. Well, I know it's a meme and everything, but journalists really are just failed writers. I mean, we constantly see famous clips of gaming journalists not being able to play games. Like, there's the Doom clip, there's the Cuphead clip, things like that. They are doing this more to write than anything. And it's also, I know it's a meme, but there seems to be some truth to it. They're not masculine men, really. They don't get the girls in the traditional way. Essentially, they are simps. They were doing it because they simp for her. And while she never may have given out any sexual favours or not, again, it doesn't matter. They were doing things to protect it in hopes that they would. That's why a lot of men do a lot of things. For all I know, this video is made by Lance to try and get with Zoe Quinn as well.
It works given the diffuse nature of like the modern internet. You can say something like that, make that kind of a claim to an already receptive audience, and they're not going to go digging for that review necessarily because like the person saying it to them, because they hold similar beliefs, they trust that person.
So yeah, I'm leaving this bit in because Lance is putting it in, trying to say, oh, see, this is what the Gamergaters do, and things like that, and he's going to try and, you know, obviously tie it to Trump as well. And just everything he said here is what Lance does. Everything Lance has put in this video, it has been one side of the story, and they just trust it because they hear it. Whereas I'm using Sitch's example because I deemed it to be good. It's not because I, you know, necessarily, well, I do like Sitch, and it's not because I agree with Sitch on a few issues and things like that. It's because his analogy seems to fit with what I know of Gamergate. It seems to be that people were worried about these accusations about Zoe Quinn at first, and then when it turned out that the whole gaming industry was just completely on her side and calling all of them sexist, that's when they all went, well, reaction mode. And then stuff about Zoe Quinn never really mattered after that because it turned out it was the whole gaming industry against their own customers. Whereas Lance is just going off this other narrative because the people he likes are agreeing with it. That's it.
So they're like, okay, yeah, I just believe that existence is out there, and as a result, this is like a clear documented instance of corruption.
Yeah, and this is the thing with Lance's video. He's not really giving receipts. He's just putting out this whole narrative as if it's fact, and then making really weak links to Gamergate and 4chan, and making it out like they're the same thing. I mean, this is an issue with not having a proper leader in Gamergate, but there were massive proponents of it. You know, Sargon of Akkad, Chris Reagan, people like that. And all of those prominent people were completely against what 4chan were doing. They were against the doxing campaign, they were against the harassment, they were against all that. So you can't actually link them, but Lance still does because he's a dishonest tit, and Zoe Quinn probably told him that that's what happened and he trusts her.
Ideas that like the Trump campaign, for example, would later prey on, like the idea of an elite class that is like lying to you, and is like mega corrupt and is all at once brilliant and bumbling, which is, you know, that's what they did with games journalism. The Trump campaign just did that with like all of their political opponents.
Yeah, so again, how are we linking them together? Oh, they have similar tactics. Yeah, okay, well, this is the same thing as what the left do as well, so what's your point? It's a tactic that works. Of course loads of people do it. My God.
So games journalism has always had ethical issues. They're just not the ones the Gamergaters targeted.
Just put a pin in this for now. We're going to get back to that later.
Alright, so I can't wait to see what the actual problems in games journalism is, because I wouldn't be surprised if it's something to do with there aren't enough women in there, or there's not enough representation or something like that. We'll see what happens though. But that was it. That was his interpretation of the Zoe Quinn story. He took every single time he had a chance, he took the least charitable interpretation of what was going on, such as linking up 4chan with Gamergate for some reason, despite Gamergate saying, nah, we don't agree with any of that. We just want to talk about you calling us all sexist, and how it seems to be a coordinated attack on your own customers and things like that. I mean, how do you think you end up with DICE, developers of Battlefield 5, saying, because gamers were not happy with a woman who was missing an arm on the front lines of World War II, that makes them all sexist and we can just avoid them. Like, that happened like 2-3 years ago. Do you not think that came about because of this culture of just being able to call everyone sexist and racist and things like that? You know, this was quite clearly happening in Gamergate, and that's quite clearly what everyone's problem with it was. That, and they were just lying, as Lance is here. Anyway, let's get into Chapter 3, which is called The Upside Down. Woo!
Like a million no-nut Novembers culminating into a singularity of infinite time and space, Gamergate unveiled an often rumored but seldom seen result of mass male alienation. An entire generation of young men indoctrinated by a society imposing upon them a set of standards which were becoming increasingly difficult to obtain.
Let me guess, it's patriarchy's fault? Because again, as I said before, the further we seem to get away from what Lance here would call patriarchy, the more men seem to want to kill themselves. So who's setting these ridiculous standards, do you think, Lance?
The first, mostly online generation that had grown up with high-speed gaming and always online subculture, social media, with its highly addictive properties, have been manipulating entire generations of young minds without much critical thought paid to the consequences.
Alright, seems to be looking good so far. Is it people saying that back in the day when less men were killing themselves, things were better, the issue is? Is that what we've got to say here?
The short-term dopamine-driven feedback loops that we have created are destroying how society works. No civil discourse, no cooperation, misinformation, mistruth.
The irony of Lance lying about Gamergate and putting this clip in, saying, yeah, it's the other side doing this. I love it. That's the second time he's done it. Just, Lance, take a look at yourself and take a look at what actually happened with Gamergate. Because again, you can't link what 4chan were doing to Gamergate, because everyone was saying what 4chan's doing was wrong, who were proponents of Gamergate.
With so much of our daily interactions being spent in front of screens with information filtered almost exclusively by artificial intelligence, the incentivization towards promoting more incendiary or conspiratorial links is only now beginning to be understood in terms of its damaging potential.
Okay, good. Yes, I agree with all this. What's this got to do with Gamergate?
Now, gamers are not inherently evil people, either for enjoying video games or participating in the subcultures that are derived from them.
Right. Thank you for agreeing with Gamergate's main point. Thank you for agreeing that calling all gamers sexist, evil, or anything like that was wrong. That was Gamergate's whole point.
There is a tendency in the mainstream media when reporting on gaming communities to focus exclusively on the toxic atmosphere that men create.
Wow, an almost exclusive male area has a community created by men? Unbelievable scenes. Not being funny, but I used to play Counter-Strike a lot in my teenage years. There were girls that were on the server that I'd play on. They were just as toxic as the men. Let's not beat around the bush here. When you're in a high-energy environment like that, of course it's going to be toxic. And the women could fucking handle that and even handle their own. But yes, it is mostly men who play these games, and yes, of course it's then going to be mostly men making these communities. For God's sake, it's not like women don't make toxic communities either, though.
And that ignores two important points. One, that violent and threatening gamers do not make up the majority of players, or even fans.
Thank you for agreeing with Gamergate.
And two, that much of the blame for online radicalization or recruiting does fall on a uniquely single factor.
Oh my god, please tell me what it is, I can't cope anymore.
You see, Gamergate was also a YouTube content goldmine that turned many skeptics into men lords. Familiar faces today like Sargon of Akkad, Thunderfoot, Mike Serenovich, Chris Raygun, and even Milo Yiannopoulos.
Well, you know, going off your pure logic here, Lance, so if Anita Sarkeesian can set up a Kickstarter to make a little show called Tropes versus Women, and people are willing to pay for that, clearly there are people out there who want that sort of thing. So what's the issue with making these people famous for saying things that people clearly want to pay for, despite the fact that at every opportunity in the last 5 to 7 years, their ability to make money has been hampered by being demonetized, by being kicked off Patreon, by being forced to make his own magazine, online magazine I should say, called The Lotus Eaters, where he has to set it up in a more unique way than you have to, Lance, because you get all the YouTube revenue. You're still probably on Patreon. In fact, you are still on Patreon. So really the fact that these people can make money in any way is actually incredible, because they have to constantly find ways around the easy way, which is what you have, Lance. So I'm trying to say this is a goldmine. Me making this YouTube channel has not been a goldmine, and I'm basically talking about the same things they are. And the difference between these people and Anita Sarkeesian is that when you, well, maybe not with Milo, but say with Sargon of Akkad, he makes it clear what he's going to do with your money. When he was on Patreon, he just said, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, you give me money if you want to. It helps out. Whereas with Anita Sarkeesian, it was, hey, I need $6,000 to make this little series on YouTube. She then gets $150,000 and then doesn't put all that money into that. She said all the money would go towards it. There's no way an 11-part YouTube series where she has a blue background and just talks on camera cost $150,000. So that's the difference there.
There's an ongoing debate as to how much the content creator influences his audience versus how much their support influences the creator. Many channels who weren't household alt brand names yet had suddenly discovered a digital goldmine. Talking about Gamergate was an internet oil rush that the right had been looking for, and as newly minted member of Breitbart, Milo ran with it.
Things being said like that is what disaffected me, because I used to be kind of a centrist, and this is what really made me look more to the right and then read what they had to recommend. Because all the left has is projection. It's like, oh, Gamergate was just something that the right could cling on to. When at the same time, as Sargon said before, you've got Anita Sarkeesian being paid £20,000 to do an hour-long talk at a uni. Whereas Sargon's constantly being kicked off every platform he tries to get on, or at least shadow banned. So who's the real grifter here? Because it looks like Sargon's living to his principles. And I mean, I know he brought up Milo Yiannopoulos, but really at this point Milo is just low-hanging fruit, so I might just skip this bit because I probably agree with Lance. And yeah, he just goes through it, and as I say, it's low-hanging fruit. Yeah, Milo Yiannopoulos is a massive hypocrite a lot of the time. I mean, I think I started watching him in about 2016, and the only reason I really liked him is because he dunked on people, and that was about it. But I don't know too many people in Gamergate who took his article writing that seriously. I mean, whenever Sargon was talking to him, it would be in live streams and things like that, and they'd just be dunking on people. It'd be like a friendly chat, so Milo really didn't seem that serious to me. And even then, I'm pretty sure that he was completely against the harassment that 4chan were doing, so you still can't connect it to that. Well done.
Alongside him, Carl Benjamin, better known as Sargon of Akkad, the online skeptic community began to overlap with the anti-feminist one.
Yeah, well, to be honest, the gaming journalists are really to blame for that, because they were all doing this stuff in the name of feminism. So, of course, they're going to react negatively to feminism, because they're like, oh, we're feminists and you're sexist, you're the evil ones, and then that's going to make them think, well, I'm not evil, so let's see what feminism has to say. Then they go into it and realise, wow, it's crazy.
A failed game designer himself, Sargon found a particularly lucrative home in producing content about Gamergate.
Well, as a game developer, sounds like he knows something about the industry then. What an ideal person to have to talk about the gaming industry, someone who's actually developed games. Wants an indictment on his character.
I talk to people who do not give a shit about ideological differences. A lot of other people are in the same boat as me. Not everyone is on an ideological crusade. I mean, I am.
So, again, just spitting facts, and I don't see how this is an indictment on Sargon at all. Sargon does talk to people who he disagrees with ideologically, but then he ends it by saying, oh, he's on an ideological crusade, and that's bad. Lance, you're literally on an ideological crusade right now. You constantly talk about socialism, even though all you really want is everything to be a co-op. It's not a bad thing to be on an ideological crusade. It's only a bad thing if you're on an ideological crusade if it actually infringes on other people's rights. You moron.
Carl's particular hatred of online feminism combined perfectly with his inability to do substantial research into any of the topics he discusses.
It's a fray!
When people say something like, well, the humans provoke them by entering into their habitat, they are assuming that the bugs are merely mindless animals that act on instinct and are not capable of moral decision-making. Rather than informing the Mormon extremists that this planet was actually inhabited, and at least delivering a demand that they leave, the bugs instead massacred them all without mercy. And if this wasn't enough, the bugs then began launching meteor attacks on an unprepared and unsuspecting Earth, with the first attack wiping out nearly 10 million people and destroying a major city. Why do I want this unironically? The answer is because Starship Troopers is a manifesto for Jordan Peterson's utopia.
So again, absolutely nothing wrong with anything Sargon said there. All his description of the film was right. A group of Mormons did try and colonize a particular planet in Starship Troopers. They were just massacred by the bugs, and then the bugs started randomly attacking Earth with meteorites. So absolutely nothing wrong there. But then I think he's been a bit disingenuous here. He then He tries to make out that Sargon's a mass genocider, I think. Or if not, he's put a really strange clip in straight after saying, why do I unironically want... And Sargon means the Starship Troopers universe, but it's almost like Lance is trying to edit it to say Sargon wants 10 million people dead, because Jordan Peterson does, which, I'm not being funny, I genuinely think he did that to make it seem like Sargon and Jordan Peterson want mass genocide, which is the most ridiculous statement I can think of. But really, if you're going to start a sentence by saying Sargon can't do basic research, and then show clips of him getting absolutely nothing wrong without you even trying to refute it, then you've not made a point at all. In fact, you've made yourself look even more stupid than I already thought you were.
The success of YouTube Gamergate content led many popular figures to pull in even bigger audiences if they continued to pour gasoline all over the fire that was being created.
See, this is another thing. Sargon's Starship Troopers video came out after Gamergate had basically died. So I don't understand how Lance has managed to bring it back round by saying, oh, Sargon can't do basic research. Here's a video from after Gamergate. Oh, look, they're all grifters. There's no through line here. I just have to say, what are you talking about? Why you brought that up? They then do the thing that really annoys me, where all they do is just have this random quote. This one isn't even attributed to anyone, by the way. But they just put this massive quote in as if it's got anything to do with what we're talking about. A monkey on a keyboard could have typed this. It doesn't make it any more true. Pick parts out of the quote you want to say, and then back it up with your own evidence, or self-evidence in the quote. But all this quote does is say the same thing. It's just, this person says this person says that, therefore Gamergate bad. No, that's not how you do this sort of thing. A quote should only be used at the start of an argument or the start of a point. And the only time it can really be used as evidence is as Lance has done before, but badly, by saying Sargon can't do basic research, here's a quote of him doing some research. But then if you don't say anything back about that, then it's pointless anyway. So yeah, I've just put this whole bit in because I don't really care what this person has to say. I just want to get to Lance's points.
Milo Yiannopoulos' tactics of attacking people involved and outright going too far would earn him the reputation of being a joker-fied bad boy in the field.
I mean, yeah, you're not wrong. He did get kicked off Twitter for referring to one of the black actresses in that female Ghostbusters film as, I believe it was a gorilla. I mean, it was always a matter of when, not if, Milo was going to get kicked off Twitter permanently.
Meanwhile, Weird Mike Serenovich, a man who is known for writing one of the creepiest blogs on the internet, selling a self-help regimen called The Gorilla Mindset, with supplements to go along with it, not to mention falsely accusing anyone he doesn't like of pedophilia, had also enjoyed a rising profile thanks to InfoWars' interest in the conspiracy side of Gamergate.
I mean, yeah, fine. Some people are weird who are involved in Gamergate. That's all he's basically said there. Mike Cernovich is a bit weird. I don't care, Lance. Everyone on the internet's a bit weird.
After his takedown of Sam Cedar, Serenovich had all but washed away the stigma of his sexual assault accusations and was rebranding as a men's rights hero. He and Jones would eventually begin pushing Pizzagate using techniques and recruitment tools that had been proven successful during Gamergate. While on the other side of the right, things were getting a lot more alternative.
So yeah, Mike Cernovich is a bit weird. That's all I've got from that. Cool, man. I've actually forgotten what your point is here. Because it's just gone from Sargon can't do basic research, which isn't true, to Milo Yiannopoulos makes edgy jokes that get him banned off platforms, which is true, to Mike Cernovich is a bit weird, which, assuming everything you've said's true, is true. But I believe what you're trying to say here is that the right wing are grifters. I don't see how you're saying that here. And you're also saying that audiences influence their creators. I mean, yes, that can be true, but I also don't see how you're trying to find the sway in any of these people here. You're just basically insulting them.
These are typical diversity images. I don't think these would be much surprising to anyone. Essentially, diversity is going to be wonderful. It helps fights. You can have new friends.
So yeah, I want to make it clear here that at the very least, Lance is saying that this part of the right is completely different to Cernovich's, to Milo Yiannopoulos' and to Sargon's. But I still think he's going to try and conflate them throughout the rest of the video.
Around 2013, the Nazis went online.
Yes, no Nazis ever existed online before 2013. There was a King of the Hill episode where Bobby Hill finds neo-Nazi websites online. That was before 2013.
Hate groups in the US, as tracked by the Southern Poverty Law Center, had been growing in number since the Knots.
Way to undermine your own point within sentences there. I'm just going to skip the rest of this. Clearly this man has no idea what he's talking about. Anyway, the whole point of this shtick is just to say that the extremists on the right were decentralizing on the internet from their old organisations, which, to be fair, seems to be the case. Which leads him into chapter 4, and I mean, it's called Are We the Baddies? But I have to say at this point, this is like watching a really long Guardian article. They can't seem to make points and stick on a one-track route. This is supposed to be about Gamergate, the Untold story. And as far as I'm concerned at this point, we're past that. We're not on about Gamergate anymore. We're going to go on about Richard Spencer here, who did bring Gamergate up a few times in his speeches, I think. But that was little more than a tactic to try and get people who may have seen themselves as Gamergaters, who were sympathetic, let's say, to Richard Spencer's white nationalism, to try and get them on board. That was it. That's pretty much the only reason he ever brought it up. But obviously, it's going to be this huge pipeline, and we're going to get some stupid arguments, so let's get into it.
Richard Spencer, the Lord of Cringe Lords. The answer to the question, what if cat urine was personified? He's a neo-Nazi parading around as a libertarian nationalist.
Wow, tell me you've never listened to Richard Spencer without telling me you've never listened to Richard Spencer. Richard Spencer hates the libertarians. Richard Spencer thinks we're in this problem because of the libertarians. Richard Spencer never tries to hide what he is. Richard Spencer, at the very least, rarely ever wears a mask. The only time he lets his mask slip is when he's shouting about wanting to oppress the Jews. But even then, he doesn't really hide that, he just says it a bit more politely.
He rose to prominence for coining the term alt-right, a rebranding of far-right fascist beliefs with a healthy dose of comedic plausible deniability.
So this was the thing with the origins of alt-right. So Richard Spencer did launch a website called Alternative Right. And originally he was actually trying to hide his white nationalism. And for a few months, alt-right basically meant not a neocon or not a mainstream Republican. But then quickly, obviously, because Richard Spencer was the one with the Alternative Right website, and he was very bad at hiding his true intentions, it very quickly then became a synonym for either neo-Nazi or white nationalist or what have you. And then it was a big thing for about a year, and basically no one uses the term alt-right anymore. So I get the feeling that Lance is going to try and say that a lot of people who call themselves alt-right for about 2 months are white nationalists, like Steve Bannon.
We memed alt-right into existence.
The alt-right successfully co-opted internet culture with the rejection of what they perceived as the progressive or woke shifting of the Overton window.
Oh god, they ruined Pepe the Frog. If he says in this video that posting a Pepe meme makes you alt-right, I am going to lose my rag.
With the rise of Gamergate and the acquisition of Pepe as representation of insular meme culture, the line between those acting out in legitimate racism and those doing it for the lulz was blurred.
So I didn't quite say it directly, but he is basically saying PewDiePie's a Nazi. There's no other reason to put PewDiePie in this part of the video.
I saw it as an opportunity to put an end to these alt-right claims that has been thrown against me. It wasn't to try and clear my name or save grace.
So I can't remember what video this was from PewDiePie, but from the way it's been cut here, it's like Lance is trying to say PewDiePie himself isn't saying he's not racist, he's just trying to say he's not political. That's what I get from that cut there. And this has happened so much in this video, that's just all I'm going to assume it is. He's trying to paint all these people as terrible.
To great utility, the alt-right was capable of unifying rejections of third-wave feminism, critical race theory, trans and gender issues with a heavily alienated generation. A generation that was beginning to be plagued by existential dread towards an unstable economy, climate change, and a continued transfer of wealth from the poorest individuals in society to the richest.
Yes, and this is once again Lance saying, oh no, all the problems that the right wing say we have, yeah, they're not problems, they're actually the cause of problems. All the issues that the left wing constantly go on about, yeah, they're the real issues. It's so stupid to try and tell these people, no, these are your real problems. People will tell you what their problems are if you ask. But Lance and other leftists just don't seem to get that. They just go, oh no, they're really worried about the rich taking money from them. While in reality, when it comes to the US anyway, inequality really isn't worsening that much. The Gini coefficient's going from about 0.43 to about 0.49. That really isn't the doomsday that he says it is. It's not in any way comparable to the climate change apocalypse he probably thinks is coming.
While people like Tucker Carlson were harnessing nationalistic sentiments to an older generation, on the internet it was the YouTubers who dominated the culture war.
You can't be for real. You're using Thunderfoot to try and say that he was pushing nationalist sentiment. The man was pro-Europe. The man left the quote-unquote skeptic community because they were all for Brexit and he wasn't. He was not a nationalist by any sense of the word. He just didn't like the fact that Anise Sarkeesian was completely misleading feminists into thinking that the gaming industry was massively sexist. Come on, man.
Spencer and the alt-right's rise coincided with the presidential campaign of Donald Trump. as did the rise and fall of Pizzagate, who had become a célébrité du jour amongst alt-right circles, had propelled his minor internet fame into a growing men's rights movement.
Holy crap, that's a lot to go through. So we've gone from Richard Spencer and the alt-right to being coincided with the Trump campaign to being coincided with the Pizzagate, and now he's going to try and connect them all. Which I think the main connection here is that most of these people will have voted for Trump, but people vote for different candidates for a lot of different reasons. There were a lot of reasons to vote for Trump. My main one would have been that it's not Hillary and not a leftist getting in. Richard Spencer's was pretty obvious. He thought he'd cut immigration and allow the white race in America to expand and oppress, which obviously didn't happen, so then he voted Biden in the next election. But he's not going to try and say that, the Biden campaign and Richard Spencer's doing coincided. No, he's not going to say that, because this is nothing but a narrative.
When his customers weren't enjoying overpriced vitamins or learning how to get away with sexual assault, they were engaging in Pizzagate, a conspiracy theory made famous thanks to Mike and Alex.
Right, cool beans, all that. What has this got to do with Gamergate? This is literally just saying that Alex Jones once said a couple of things about Gamergate, and Mike Cernovich was a proponent of it, and then they're talking together again and coming up with another conspiracy theory. What has it got to do with Gamergate? No one talks about Pizzagate anymore because it wasn't all over the media like Gamergate was. There wasn't a whole section of an industry, not even a whole industry, attacking their customers. Pizzagate's off a completely different tangent, and the only relevance it has to Gamergate is that some people involved in Pizzagate were involved in Gamergate. That's it.
At a time when the hatred of Hillary Clinton was a blend of justified, war hawkish, Libya, super predators, rape apologia, Mike decided to take down the Clinton empire with the only currency the internet accepted: bad shittery.
I mean, this whole bit's just an expose on Mike Cernovich. Again, nothing really to add here other than it's not got much to do with Gamergate, other than Mike Cernovich's audience was probably buying this stuff, or influencing him into it. I don't know which it is, because Lance doesn't really go into that. And in fact, Lance admits this. Lance admits this doesn't have anything to do with Gamergate outside of Cernovich being involved.
Pizzagate wasn't a direct one-to-one evolution with Gamergate, although there was significant overlap in the communities thanks to figures like Cernovich being the propagandists promoting both.
Honestly, coming from someone who binge-watched a lot of stuff about Gamergate after the fact, I didn't even know Mike Cernovich was involved in Gamergate. And the people I watched on Gamergate said nothing about Pizzagate, outside of they have absolutely no evidence for it, or at least very weak evidence for it. So until something concrete comes out, they're not going to talk about it. It was only Cernovich doing this, and it's like, ooh, see, there's significant overlap because Cernovich was saying it. Your evidence doesn't add up there, really. But it doesn't really matter, you've got a narrative to get through.
After a firm crackdown on Pizzagate shut down Reddit's, Discord's, forums, and some legal woes for InfoWars, remnants of the fractured conspiracy theory slowly overlapped with the other side of the culture war in the meme war theater.
What is this video, man? What is going on? It's just pogo sticks from point to point thinking there's some sort of link? When meme warfare was across the political spectrum, and across all political issues going on, as it still is. My god, this better be good.
Pepe, the lovable frog in Kekistan, a subculture built around the World of Warcraft word for LOL, or lol, that fused with an ancient Egyptian frog god, Kek. Look, just bear with us, okay?
Yeah, sure, Lance, take your time, I'm not going to rush you here, but like, really, again, it's like what he said before when he brought up PewDiePie. It's like, oh, the lines between genuine racism and people doing it for the lols, it's all blurred, and that means that I can call them all racist. No, you idiot, that means the lines are blurred, and if you really think freaking PewDiePie is a genuine racist, then really, your assessments on things that are racist cannot be trusted. A lot of these Peppies were made to be very, very funny. And just like Mel Brooks made Blazing Saddles, which had a lot of racist jokes in, it was just that, it was there to be a joke. Please stop taking these little frog boys too seriously.
This is the internet, it's not exactly going to be like the Battle of Gettysburg. Memes became the currency in the online culture wars, belonging to a certain group like an alt-right community in 4chan.
Oh my god, the infamous time Richard Spencer wore a Pepe the Frog pin once. Literally once. Then that means Pepe the Frog is obviously a symbol of the alt-right. No, Pepe the Frog was just a symbol of not the left, and even that didn't last very long. The only reason that really happened is because Donald Trump tweeted out a Pepe. That's the only reason. But yeah, least charitable interpretation as usual, Lance. Keep going.
It was also so anonymous that the ability to demonstrate belonging came in the relevance and efficacy of memology. To this effect, the creativity and diversity of Pepe memes grew in both their scale and racism.
Thank God we had 2016, man. It makes people say stupid stuff like this. Pepes were used to show that you belong to a racist group. This is on the same levels. This is why 4chan was successful in saying that the OK hand symbol was a racist white power symbol. This is exactly why, because people like you just keep pushing these narratives. That you see all these people that you don't like doing something incredibly innocuous, and then you can say, yes, that is a white power symbol. Same with Pepe, the exact same thing with Pepe. You are an idiot, Lance.
There was also a belief online that the memes themselves had the ability to manipulate life itself. While they were certainly in the minority, the biggest upset in modern political history did lend some life to the magical powers of the internet.
No, the belief is that using memes as comedy undermines power and those in power. This is basic Saul Alinsky tactics. You do something fun and you undermine those in power, you'll get popular support on your side, which is quite vital in democracy.
Remember how we said Milo Yiannopoulos had capitalized heavily on the Gamergate movement and pushed it into a key talking point of the conservative culture wars? Well, that wasn't by accident. It was by design.
Right, come on now. Chapter 5. Let's have some sensible takes, Lance. Tell me how Bannon is actually the whole puppet master behind everything that the right wing are doing these days.
As America was gearing up for an election, Donald Trump was apparently making a deal with the devil, according to Joshua Green.
I don't care what a random journalist had to say, just give me your take.
And the devil's name was Steve.
There we go. Steve Bannon is the devil. Get your 2 minutes of hate out, Lance. Come on, let's get to some arguments.
Von Bannon of House Harkonnen has a really weird story, explained in the book Devil's Bargain, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the Storming of the Presidency. He made his early wealth through the licensing rights to Seinfeld by negotiating a deal on behalf of Ted Turner. He then got Goldman Sachs to invest in video game mining, and no, we don't mean that kind. This was way before Bitcoin. We're talking about gamers playing games like World of Warcraft for hours just collecting gold so they can sell it off for real cash in the real world.
So yeah, this is all just saying how Bannon got his wealth, and then he explains that gamers weren't too happy about it and basically complained enough to make Blizzard and the rest of the gaming industry not make that such a lucrative business prospect.
While bruised, but not defeated, Bannon learned the power of the quote,
rootless white males who spend all their time online.
5 years later, when he joined Breitbart, he immediately began working on hiring those rootless men to radicalize the masses into populism.
Okay, so he worked out the power of populism. Where are you going to tell me where this goes wrong?
He had been an independent documentarian, if you want to use that term in the loosest possible sense.
Lance, if you call yourself a documentarian after making this video, I'm going to throw this clip back at you so fast. You wouldn't even have time to say you're fucking a white male.
And was interested in transforming online activism into something that could take shape in the real world. Milo Yiannopoulos bridged that gap and was one of the major assets to transfer the Gators into Pepes and eventually into MAGAs.
Again, it's this whole thing of like, oh, the leadership leading their audience, but Lance admits before that these leaders can also be influenced by their audience, so which is it? Because he seems to be well into the mindset of, in this case, it's the leaders dragging their audience about by the nose. Because I don't actually see what's going wrong here so far. It seems to be, oh, these people are managing to manipulate people better than I am. Because I'm not being funny here, lads, but this whole thing has just been manipulation so far. There's been a few verifiable facts, sure, but it's not really making up the majority of the video. I mean, you started this section off by saying Bannon is the devil, and then saying he was good with investments. And now you're just saying, oh, he's getting people onto his side. When really you don't have a problem with the way he's doing that. What you really have a problem with is the fact that he got people onto Trump's side and got him in 2016.
Milo is already positioned as one of Bannon's top culture warriors and was also beginning to talk about other conspiracy theories that would help cross-pollinate the groups. The big enemies that were targeted were third-wave feminists and social justice warriors who dyed their hair into neon furry expressions of soy.
Look, Lance, I can't help it if Milo Yiannopoulos was pointing out a lot of issues we were having was because of third-wave feminism and SJWs. They are literally in charge of pretty much every country at this point. I mean, the UK today said we might have to shut down the entire industry of cricket because about 4 years ago, some guy in the Yorkshire cricket team used a bad P word to refer to a Pakistani.
Outraged, the mere thought of being outraged, they were a scourge on the internet, demanding that everything be censored and no one have fun.
Where's the lie?
While various corners of the right-wing circle would attack them in the form of YouTube rants and college eviscerations, hatred of liberals, Democrats, and their associations with a globalist pedophile cabal had taken a life of its own.
So that was it, that was that chapter. That just seemed to me to say Steve Bannon is evil because, he was fighting in the right-wing Twitter war and owned Breitbart. He's not actually pointed out how he's evil yet, but we'll see what's going on in Chapter 6, which is called Trump. God, let's see how this goes.
Donald Trump's victory shocked the world. Every poll and data point and projection was showing Hillary Clinton to be a sure thing. US imperialism was secured.
US imperialism was secured. It wasn't Trump that was on the pro-imperialist side. I mean, Hillary Clinton was a civil servant while a massive US imperial expansion was going on, so I have no idea what you're talking about there.
Then an outsider came along to drain the swamp. By outsider, of course, we mean that he wasn't a hardline Republican favorite.
Well, what type of insider was he? Where was he popular? The answer to that question is nowhere in the mainstream. Where was he an insider?
He was still a rich elite that had no sign of changing. But he was crass and open about his nationalism and uncomfortable love for the country.
That's literally their only thing. He's an elite and he was in those circles. Elite circles, I should say. Okay, he wasn't as soon as he announced his run for presidency. He had very little support inside the mainstream elite circles, inside Hollywood, inside any political institution. So don't give me this crap that just because he's rich, he's not an outsider. For God's sake. Such a stupid Marxist take on the world.
A reality TV showman who was beloved by a cult-like following and the jingoistic power of a monster truck.
Again, nothing Trump's really done in practice is that different from Bernie Sanders. Yet you call Bernie Sanders a cult-like following or anything like this, then you get told you're wrong by these people. So this is what I mean. This whole video is just, right, they're doing what we would do and are doing, but they're right-wing, so they're bad. That's it. It's ridiculous.
Trump's presidency played out pretty much exactly as bananas as you'd expect. But even more shocking was the mutation taking place from Pizzagate into the final boss of conspiracy theories, the Shang Tsung, if you will. One that combined multiple other favorites through the years, like evil cabal of Jewish bankers, evil cabal of Jewish media, Illuminati, rich elite families, mostly Jewish, secret cannibal cult of pedophiles, evil government conspiracies and collusion, and of course, the most evil being in history, George Soros. And that's not even the most batshit part. Hinging at the center of this was Donald Trump being the savior of humanity, working behind the scenes with a top-level informant named only Q, who spoke oddly like someone had been reading Alice in Wonderland on ketamine.
I mean, at this point, we are just way off Gamergate. This is Gamergate, the untold story. No, this isn't an untold story. This is what everyone in the media has been saying for years. Gamergate is never going to be forgotten, and all this video is doing is reinforcing that. So at this point, I'm just going to completely skip Chapter 7, because all he does is go through some images of the, videos I should say, of the Capitol riots on January 6th, after blaming QAnon for radicalising this cult-like behaviour, as he puts it. Just a load of stuff I don't feel I need to go through in this video, I'd just rather get to his points, as I say. So, Chapter 8, Making Sense of the Pieces.
The dust had settled on the Capitol. The glass repaired, the families have grieved.
The families have grieved? How many people died in the Capitol 6 riots? I remember the one woman, and I think there were a couple of police. But he's making this out, as a lot of journalists do as well, like the Capitol riots were anything close to, say, 9/11. For a riot, very little damage was really done, especially compared to other riots you saw in America.
The culmination of so many different groups united together by a common thread, or post, or retweet. We've seen what the radicalization of a single individual on the internet can do in terms of causing damage in the real world.
What's your answer then, Lance? Because before you were saying that people on your side were being accused by people on the right of trying to promote censorship. Is that what you're going to do here, Lance? I think it is.
But never in numbers this large. Most cults or religions met in real life, trained in real life. Or more importantly, they knew they were part of a collective group taking orders from a hierarchy. Q may have been that hierarchy, but he was still anonymous. And what people decided to do with that information was polished by outside agents.
Going to affirm the massive landslide of Donald J. Trump? Are we going to turn over a constitutional republic to the forces of, what did Vigano say? The forces of darkness. See through in the fog of war is to have clarity. It's to have clarity that January 6th was going to be the day, or one of these big days, and you had to converge everything down to January 6th.
So this is obviously meant to be a accusation of stochastic terrorism, in that, the language that they use and all this, it says, you need to do violence, otherwise we fall under the force of darkness. And don't get me wrong, I think stochastic terrorism to an extent exists. And is what Steve Bannon was doing a form of stochastic terrorism? I think you could make an argument there for that particular clip. But really, when we get down to it, you're trying to stem all this from Gamergate. As Bannon was saying earlier, it's a load of rootless young white males who managed to come together to make the power to ruin his his coin mining operation. The people at the January 6th riots, if you want to call them that, they weren't those type of people. They were all boomers. They were a bunch of 40-plus-year-olds. I mean, sure, there were some that were younger, but these weren't your typical gamer, and they weren't your typical Gamergater. So you've got no through line here. You're just loosely connecting people. That's all you're doing here, and that's all the left do. This video could have been 10 minutes. This video could have been a page of here's how all the people are connected, and here's a bio of what they had to do with the certain parts of the conspiracy I'm putting together. Thank God I'm cutting a lot of this out.
You could point the finger at the corporations for allowing it to grow to such dangerous proportions, specifically big tech, who knew well before it gotten out of control that it was going to be a problem.
Yes, let's blame the big tech corporations for not doing enough censorship. That's the issue here.
You could blame some of the adolescent gamers whose rootless rage was manipulated into revolutionary action once they had grown up.
Lance, for God's sake, you have no evidence that any of these people were involved in Gamergate whatsoever. For God's sake, I wasn't even involved in Gamergate, and yet you'll probably lump me in with the Gamergaters. You're just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks here.
You could say it was those who vilified every single gamer as if they were a misogynist or a racist.
I mean, it is very irritating when you get accused of doing something you're clearly not, or because you were a part of a particular community. But hey, the journalists didn't need to suffer, did they?
You could say it was the crony corruption between the publishers and AAA game producers, selling reviews and throwing journalism out the window.
Okay, now I'm just confused. How does this have anything to do with January 6th? What the hell does this have to do with Trump? What are you talking about, Lance?
Or perhaps even the president himself cheering them on. But what really lies at the core of all this?
So there we go, we're going to get the ultimate truth of what's caused all this. If he says Gamergate, I'm done.
After the shooting in Columbine,
oh my god, just stay on topic.
Both parents and politicians began to scramble to determine what could have caused such an atrocity, and violent video games became the focus. Titles like Night Trap and Doom and Mortal Kombat were seen as so grotesque that they were actually infecting children's minds.
Oh, what does this have to do with Gamergate? What does this have to do with Donald Trump? What are you talking about here? Come on, get to the point. It's an hour-long video. It could have been 10. 10 minutes, that is, not 10 hours.
When actual studies and research revealed something completely different.
Yeah, he ends it with a clip of another YouTuber going through saying, violence in video games doesn't make people more violent, blah, 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 blah. Just bear in mind that he brought up that, he kind of said, I'm going to tell you what's at the core of all this. What's at the core of, like, January 6th and the Trump presidency and all that. And then he randomly brings up Columbine and says video games don't make people more violent. And then moves on to Chapter 9, which he has humbly called the truth. I mean, why put that whole bit in with violent video games at all? Just cut it out. We didn't need it. It didn't add anything.
So, was everything about Gamergate a lie? Of course not. I mean, there was so many competing groups and ideologies and pent-up frustration that at the time nearly everything became hyperpolarized.
So you've even just admitted that you can't really make the connections you have here. So well done, Lance. You can't even keep your own conspiracy straight.
The Gators were completely correct, for example, that Anita Sarkeesian didn't come from a gamer background.
It's a soundtrack of one song, except I'm doing video games. So it's not exactly a fandom. I'm not a fan of video games. I actually had to learn a lot about video games in the process of making this.
So she was effectively an outsider, critiquing a group that saw it as an attack.
Critiquing a group? She was saying the whole industry was sexist and all gamers are sexist. The reason it was perceived as an attack from an outsider is because it was literally an attack from an outsider. You just proved that yourself.
She didn't get everything correct in her analysis, like the fact, for example, that Hitman doesn't actually require you to murder a sex worker to get through a level. You're in fact punished if you complete the mission that way. And there is absolutely a monstrous problem with the relationship between video game companies and reviewers. Just not in the way you think.
So I absolutely love this. Lance is now on the side of Gamergate and what Gamergate was actually about back in 2016. You know, go 5 years from now, he's probably going to be a capitalist like the rest of us. You know, he'll probably be on the same ideological bent as, say, Adam or Sitch or something. Because you can't live a lie for that long. He probably wants to make this video saying it was all lies, but, you know, you need some truth in there. This is how propaganda works. You put some truth in there, but make the rest of it misleading, and that's what he's done here. And then he goes into a clip of that Kotaku journalist going on about how AAA games will treat journalists pretty nicely, essentially bribe them to try and get favourable reviews and things like that. Yeah, that's fine, we've all known that. Whatever, carry on. And Lance goes into a whole bunch of other issues in the AAA gaming community, like blacklisting journalists, having loot boxes, stuff like that. Stuff that literally everyone agrees is bad anyway, and that, believe it or not, Gamergate did point out too. So yeah, let's get to the bit that actually matters, Lance.
So then, the other question remains. Were Gamergaters all incels, or at the very least misogynists? There is no question there was, and still is, a large amount of individual actors engaged in behavior like online bullying, hate speech, doxing of multiple figures, death threats, rape threats, and swatting. The fact that they were largely anonymous and connected globally 24/7 fueled the scale of abuse.
Lance has basically said here that, obviously online, there are a lot of dickheads. That's essentially all he said there. And all I can think is that, Lance, can you please just say something substantive here? Because you've done this big roundabout, basically. You've done a big old circle. You started off with Gamergate origin story, then, you know, gone into gone into Bannon, gone into Trump, gone into QAnon, gone into all this stuff, and your main connection to Gamergate with all of them is that a few people who are part of Gamergate are also part of that. Ignoring the bigger context that there are a lot more people involved. I mean, you didn't even say Bannon was involved in Gamergate. So at that point, why even bring him up? I mean, the best you can do is say, oh, he took Gamergaters and pushed them over to his side. I mean, that's certainly true, possibly with Sargon. Didn't work on Chris Reagan, didn't work on Armored Skeptic. So a lot of people it didn't work on, so it just collapses. So your whole conspiracy just collapses.
Many of the points raised in Feminist Frequency regarding the industry were salient and often unspoken ones.
Oh my god, go on then. What's this salient point?
It's no secret that fighting games often feature sexualized female characters, and often feature characters whose design is rooted in ethnic stereotypes.
Boobs are awesome.
Sometimes these two elements combine in sexualized, exotified female characters.
We have no problem with any of these things. In fact, we actually want more of them.
Salient point. Lance, salient fucking point is something you disagree with.
In Street Fighter 4, Elena wears, well, she wears almost nothing. But the bands that she wears on her arms, legs, and neck vaguely suggest African tribal culture, and she possesses that stereotypical character trait of a mystical connection to the earth.
Oh, and just as I thought, representation in video games was supposed to be good to these people. For fuck's sake.
But to the original question, no, of course not. The problem comes in when people attempt to simply draw a line through each one of these phenomena, like they're a natural linear evolution of each other.
Why are you only putting this point here? Why is this only at the end of the video? The whole implication through this entire thing is you're saying, oh, there's overlap through all these, so people are obviously going to make the connection that you're saying there's a linear line there. So why are you all of a sudden saying that's not the case here, Lance?
Whereas the whole thing is closer to a web with many overlapping pieces and characters who along the way learned that they can manipulate it all for their own nefarious purposes.
I love how he had Charlie from Always Sunny in Philadelphia doing his ridiculous conspiracy stuff in the background there. Lance, that is a meme for you right now.
And the worst part about all this is that the whole thing is a sleight of hand. What I mean to say is that secret pedophile cabals, or elite liberal pizza enthusiasts, or even women and non-binary gaming journalists are not what are actually threatening men.
Oh my god, it's like he's never actually listened to any point any Gamergater has said, or anyone in his opposition has said. And I know that's true because I've seen him in live debate against people from the other side of the political spectrum, and he has no idea what their arguments actually are. And in the end, like he did with that Lawrence Southern debate, just bring out a big laundry list of things that they've done that he can call them racist for. Because Lance doesn't have any actual arguments. There's been no arguments in this whole video. At least none he can actually back up. And the ones he does back up, just straight away he either disagrees with his own words in the video, or the evidence doesn't support his point anyway.
If you look at the current leading causes of death in men, it's first accidental death, a category that combines drug overdoses and car accidents. Now, the leading cause of overdoses is from opioids, and the epidemic that swept across North America started in large part because pharmaceutical companies like Purdue Pharma incentivized doctors to push their products.
This is just a whole bit of big pharma bad. It's pure whataboutism. Hey, there's a problem that men are getting constantly demonized in the media and by politicians and by journalists and stuff like that. That should probably stop because it might drive them to suicide. And he just goes, yeah, but what about pharmaceuticals? It's like, yeah, well, that's an issue too. But we're talking about this problem for now. Can we just concentrate on that? But Lance can't, because he's an idiot. Well, also because this plays directly into his politics, but that's neither here nor there.
Next is suicide, and the leading causes are mental illness, something that the US healthcare system is not adequately addressing.
Yes, again, Lance, no one is saying that we are trying to get away from that or that we're ignoring that. Like, for the love of God, if someone points out a problem, you don't always need to go, yeah, well, what about these other bigger problems? We usually reply with, yes, that's bad too, Lance. Many people are talking about that, and it's in the mainstream. Usually anyway. But this is also a problem that may be lower in magnitude, but absolutely nobody is talking about it and we are not trying to find solutions to it. Please stop whatabouterying. I'm just going to skip the rest of the whataboutism now. Which leads him into chapter 10, which is called Speedrun, and I have no idea why, so let's get into it.
So let's recap. Gamergate was provoked by two key incidents that grew into an internet subculture that directly targeted multiple groups.
Watch PSA Sitch's video, I don't know how many times I'm going to say that in this video, but go watch it, because that summary of Gamergate is ridiculous.
Milo Platypus, under the guise of Steve Bannon, was quick to weaponize the phenomenon and turn it into a mainstream culture war.
You know before when he said that Gamergate wasn't a linear line to MAGA Chuds and January 6th and all that? This recap is showing a linear line from Gamergate to January 6th.
Mike Cernovich at the time became known as the, quote, based lawyer, who approached Gamergate from a legal perspective and rapidly became one of the Gators' heroes.
See what I mean? These people were part of Gamergate, and then they became Trump supporters. For various different reasons, in a multifactorial analysis you would be able to see that, but this is a pure, single, one-dimensional look at this issue, which is why it comes off so stupid.
Eventually, Bannon became the president's chief strategist and rode the wave of patriotism through QAnon all the way to the insurrection itself.
Literally, it's a linear line from Gamergate to January 6th. That's his whole recap. And yet he said earlier in the video that people who do that are idiots and it's actually a big old web. Why are you making a linear line then? Lance just can't keep a straight argument for this whole video.
This whole story ends up being less about a singular event, but more about the evolution and mutations of online outrage being synthesized and funneled into real-life action. The media ran around, and still runs to this day, like a headless chicken, furiously trying to keep up and only observing small pieces along the way.
I mean, to be fair, that's the media with every story. But you have literally just done that yourself here, Lance. You focused on basically 3 people from Gamergate. Well, 2 from Gamergate, really. You focused on Milo, and you focused on Mike Cernovich. One of which I didn't even know was involved in Gamergate, and as I say, I binge-watched a lot of Gamergate stuff. To then say that January 6th happened because of it. Like, you are literally just acting as the media here, Lance. You've got to realise that.
Anyone who's cashed in on the process can have plausible deniability that they never personally advocated for hate speech, or revenge porn, or doxing, or even calls to violence, even if the effects of their work result in it.
Can't we just turn this around and use this on you, Lance? Because you were saying to your audience that things like Carl Rittenhouse is a murderer, didn't have any right to self-defense, things like that, didn't have any reason to be in Kenosha, things which can all be proven to be false. And then this led to people following the jury home, from MSNBC, to scuffles going on outside of the courthouse, to the threat of riots if he's found innocent. Can we not accuse you of this same sarcastic terrorism? Which I know is whataboutery, but the difference here is that when it comes to, say, Sargon of Akkad, who I have watched for many, many years, whenever this harassment was happening or anything like that, he would always say, don't do it. He would always disavow in some way. Now, the Serfs may have done the same thing when it comes to those examples I've just brought up, but I haven't seen it yet, and if he has done them, fair enough. But still, be careful what you wish for, Lance.
Jeremy? Oh, wait, did we forget to mention Jeremy Hambley?
Was quartering even about at Gamergate? What the hell? I'm not going to lie to you, I have no idea what's going on at this point. I think at this point it's just Lance trying to do a Lawrence Southern on him. Basically having a laundry list of how he's a grifter or something. Let's take a look.
In 2021, on a podcast with all the biggest names in outrage porn, the Quartering explained firsthand how lucrative the moral panic over Star Wars The Last Jedi had been.
Yeah, I'm not being funny at this point, I just don't really care. I'm not going to run defense for Jeremy, I'm going to give Jeremy the chance to defend himself against this, because I am certain that Lance's character attacks here will not be accurate. And as far as I'm even aware, Jeremy wasn't even about during Gamergate. In fact, yeah, his first video is from 2017, and it was about SJWs in Magic the Gathering. This has nothing to do with Gamergate, this is just another offshoot. Like, why not talk about Comicsgate or something like that? And the reason is because Lance wants to further the tarnished name of Gamergate in left-wing circles. He doesn't care about truth, he just wants to win. So with that, I'm just going to skip over the entire takedown of the quartering by the Serfs here. And by the way, he spends a whole 5 minutes of the video on this, which is just ridiculous, and the only reason he brings it up is because Jeremy mentions that the Magic the Gathering issues were very much in parallel with what happened with Gamergate, and he brings it up, and that's the only reason he puts him in this video, really. So anyway, after he mentions that, Lance goes on.
And he's not alone. Conservatives will continue to push whatever talking point is either the most politically effective, or from a content creator's side, the most lucrative.
Well, that explains why you've done this whole video on Gamergate and lied about basically everything.
Liberals will continue to either enable or ignore the systems that foster inequality, while the media plays catch-up.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Look, Lance, here's the thing. You really want these people to exist too. It is clearly lucrative for you. You still have a Patreon, you still get ads, you're still on Twitch, all that. And look, this is just the latest 18 videos of yours. 11 of them are to do with the people you would call Gamergaters. Many, if not all of whom, you have featured in this video somewhere. Doing exactly what Gamergate had an issue with. Calling them racist, sexist, deplorable, whatever. This is as lucrative for you as it is for them. Just making videos on YouTube does not make one a grifter. I think it's ridiculous to say otherwise.
Or ignores what's really happening until it's too late.
So there you go, that was the last point he had to make. After that, it's an exiting skit and credits. Which, by the way, when it comes to these credits, like, what the heck, like, how much money did he put into this? Because this video, at the moment, about 2 to 3 days in, has about 13,000 views. You know, it's not a lot for a 60,000 subscriber channel. And yet all this money has gone into it. I mean, clearly he wants to influence people and make sure that people know that, oh, Gamergate was evil and caused January 6th. But really, after going through that hour-long video, which I am surprised that I managed to get through that in an hour and a half, to be honest. But managing to get through that, he had nothing to add. He had nothing to say that hadn't already been said before. Everyone brings up Gamergate as the core reason that these things are happening. Well, really, our issues go further back than Gamergate, I'm afraid. Gamergate was a symptom of our problem. And the symptoms only got worse from there. First they infected the universities, which is where all the ideas spawned from. And even King of the Hill was pointing this stuff out years ago. Then what do you do when you go out of university with all those ideas and you've infected the young minds with it? Well, those people either get jobs or go into politics. And then, as I say, you end up with ridiculous decisions made everywhere. This channel is basically dedicated to finding all aspects of things like that. Just to prove the point that it is absolutely everywhere. The gaming industry just happened to be one of the first places where this problem got out of hand. And the reason for that is that a narcissistic Zoe Quinn, who ranted about this blog post and these forum posts to her friends in the industry, managed to get them to say that all gamers are sexist. Gamergate was simply a reaction to that, and then it was a big old culture war within the gaming community, which really is still ongoing. Because really history is an entire culture war, and obviously if you have culture wars, you have subcultures, you also have subculture wars. And this is all Gamergate was. It was part of a big overarching culture war, which has many fronts, it has many factions, and if you try and make a through line through all these factions and all these people of influence and things like that, you're going to get yourself in a tangled mess. We can say that leftism comes straight from universities, we can see what these people are writing, what they cite, and where it's all influenced from. It goes all the way back to Rousseau in some cases. Whereas when it comes to trying to say the same thing about Gamergate, it's basically impossible. I mean, Steve Bannon was brought up and he couldn't even relate into Gamergate properly. Because people were just doing what they naturally do. They were trying to enjoy a hobby that they have, they were told they were a bad person for liking that hobby, and they reacted in kind. I think Carl says it best.
Yeah, people generally react negatively to phenomenal bigots on the internet.
And so, Lance, because you are being a phenomenal bigot on the internet about Gamergate and the people who support Gamergate and Trumpers, and whatever you want to call the right wing, you have got a negative reaction from me, and I'd be surprised if I'm the only negative reaction you get. I look forward to Adam and Sitch covering this video in their live stream. But that's about everything I had for you today. So, if you got this far, thank you very much for watching the video, and even if you didn't, again, thank you very much. And until next time, as usual, goodbye.